So I'm going to address a couple of questions that I've received, and then if there are any questions online, we will take them. So this is a question from Emmanuel. Emmanuel, I know you're not watching, but you could listen to the recording later. You're right. I understand the point that in ignorance, the mind is an instrument of bondage. But how can the body be also an instrument of bondage? I mean, the only problem humans deal with are psychological, since the body is neutral. And in the absence of psychological conflict, there isn't any body bondage. Okay, Emmanuel, when somebody has wronged you, they have cheated you out of your money, and you've been feeling, the upsetness, the anger within yourself, even though this person may come back and pay you what they owe you, or even when you will realize that in fact it was not them who stole the money but their cousin, and you realize that this person is innocent, you will not experience the same relationship with that person than that you had before the mistaken perception. Although now the perception has been corrected, there is something that also needs to be takes time to release it. You may understand that I am consciousness, and that nothing affects consciousness, that consciousness is transparent, consciousness is peace, consciousness is the only reality. Consciousness is not seeking retribution. Although you may understand that, the fact that you have been living with the belief that you are somebody that needs to be protected, somebody that has personal rights, somebody that should be honored and respected, etc. Although you've been living with this belief that you are a separate entity, in spite of your understanding that you are consciousness, therefore you no longer perceive yourself as a separate entity, there are still reactions within the body that are stored within the body. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. The old program may resurface. If a thought crosses your mind about the future, maybe concern about the money and your livelihood in the future, although it's just a passing thought and you're not believing that you are somebody in time, that you don't exist in time. You will experience an internal contractions. You will experience a similar sensation within your body. You worry about your future wealth. When you go out to the parking lot and you find somebody that has bumped into your car, and although you recognize yourself as consciousness, you may find some old emotions arising. So the point that I'm making is that although we may be free from the belief that we are a separate self, that's not the ticket, that's not the full liberation. Many truth lovers have come to the understanding that they are consciousness. But the old pattern still arises. And these patterns that arise can arise because we forget that we are consciousness, which is still psychological. But they may arise although we have not forgotten that we are consciousness, although we know ourselves as awareness. They may arise as a body contraction. You would be surprised if somebody looks at your partner in a certain way or looks at you in a certain way. You will find some of the old patterns arising. So, yes, it is very important to contemplate that what I am is transparent presence, aware presence. That what I am is not an object in time and space. It's a very important understanding, a very important contemplation. And the rest is living it. Living as consciousness. You may have all sorts of disappointments in your life, expectations. You can't control how other people behave in your space. They may behave in ways that do not agree with you, that trigger in you the emotions, the negative emotions. You may have some judgments that arise, again, about yourself, out of the old program. And the body has a longer memory than thoughts, passing thoughts are one after the other, but the body is your next arena for clearing, for dissolving, for exploring the places where you are holding, the places that you are hiding, that are very subtle, unseen. Could be in your hands, your shoulders, within your breath. So there is a scanning that is not in time, it's in presence, where you scan the feeling level, the sensory level. It's a silent inner looking, and one could say releasing. It's more like going there and remaining still, going to that sensation as presence, and to be unmoving, unmoved, in complete availability. It's not mental, it's not an exercise of thought or comprehension. It is more a sort of yoga. Let's say a spiritual yoga of let's say being the light at the feeling level. And that takes place real time, meaning as presence in this moment. So in this moment, you can turn your attention as you are hearing these words, watching this video. You can turn your attention to the sensation of your face, your head, the socket of your right eye, slightly inside of your forehead, in the socket of your left eye. Listen to them, sense them. Listen to their hum. Go deeper and deeper. And go to the sensation of your belly. Invite the breath. Just be there. So, yes, Emmanuel, there is, beyond the psychological understanding that I am consciousness, there is the yoga of living as that. And the body is your next arena of exploration and contemplation. You know, when we go to retreats, we usually do some yogas that are inviting this sort of contemplation. By the way, any questions online concerning this, or any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Holly.
It's, I think mostly unrelated to what you've been talking about so far. My question is about absolute freedom, the absolute freedom of consciousness. I was reflecting on that, and it seemed to me that there's more or less two choices at a time, which is to either be consciousness or believe that I am this body mind. Is that related to the freedom of consciousness, or does that make sense?
Well, it's good to, it's a good way of putting it, that there is the option of being a meme, the whole bundle of thoughts and feelings and stories, the separate self. It's an option of being that and being engaged in defending that and perceiving everything through those lenses, through that paradigm. And the option of not knowing, of pure being. In option A, we are defining ourselves, we are defining the others, we are in the mental realm, we are assuming that we know. And so we are living the character story that we have assumed is real. In option B, we live as not knowing. We are this not knowing. And consciousness is not an object, is not a particular body mind. It cannot be is not an object, cannot be known as an object, nor this not knowing, nor is this not knowing nothing. There is a reality to our experience. And this reality does not have an owner. It is not attached to anything what we refer to as awareness. It's not an object, it's not something that you can put a rope around it or grab it by the tail and pull it into your house. It's not like that. It is non-phenomenal. But although it is non-phenomenal, it does not mean it is not. Under the objective, the physical model, reality is something. Like a rock is real, a tree is real, a table is real. That's under the model that assumes from the onset that there is a physical reality. It is an assumption. While upon the contemplation of reality, we come upon the reality of presence, of beingness, which is not a thing, but yet is not nothing. So we realize that what is eternal and absolute in our experience is awareness, presence, consciousness. And not the body, not the oak tree, not the rock, not the table. They come and go, they are subject to conditions. So, in terms of the contemplation of the absolute reality, there is only one reality. And yes, it is absolute. There cannot be two realities. There are no such thing as two realities. It's one reality. The reality that knows everything, that is everything, and that has no beginning and no end, and is not therefore in time or space. So therefore it is absolute, being one and not subject to any conditions. It is absolute. So the reality of consciousness is absolute. There is only one reality. But it cannot be a concept. It cannot be some idea or some experience or something. Given that it's absolute, it cannot be defined. What would define it? In other words, it is self-defining. It defines itself by itself as itself to itself, given there is no other reality outside of it to know it. And this reality that we are talking about right now is the reality that is talking through a body-mind, through an instrument. It is producing these words, this language. And we know this reality as that which is never not. In other words, always is. And in your experience, you know what always is, what is eternal as I. When you refer to I, you're referring to the reality of being, the absoluteness of consciousness. And the I that is referring to consciousness is consciousness itself. The I is consciousness, refers to itself as I, knows itself as I, knows itself as itself. Beyond thinking, beyond any psychological or mental model, it knows itself directly, like the fire knows the heat, like water knows H2O, as metaphors. And yes, Holly, whenever you leave yourself, in fact, leaving yourself only refers to believing and feeling that I am somebody. Whenever you are feeling and thinking and living as I am somebody, mortal body mind, some particular form, some particular object, you are not happy. You can test it out. You will find that you have moved away from your true nature of peace and happiness, and you are unhappy. Because as somebody, there are concerns about this body, about the future, about our fortune, about our relationships, etc. So whenever you leave yourself, meaning whenever you assume yourself to be somebody, you can stop, if you can, just simply return to being. Because one of the qualities of consciousness is being. I know I am. So return to I am. Without adding any adjectives, without adding any qualitative to the I am. Just pure I am. I, beingness, amness. What Francis always says, it's about happiness. That's a very valuable pointer. It's about happiness. And happiness cannot depend on something. Cannot depend on relationship, cannot depend on money, cannot depend on health, cannot depend on past or future events. Because that would not be happiness, it would be the dependability, it would be conditional happiness. So moment by moment in your life, notice whenever you place conditions upon your happiness, that it has to be this way or that way. As soon as you say it has to be this way or that way, you have placed a condition upon your happiness. Whenever you're thinking and believing and feeling, oh, not like this, last time it was like that, it was better, blah, blah. At that moment, you are engaging in ignorance and you are feeding the wrong beast. Well, you're feeding a beast. There's no right beast. Okay, Holly.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other question?
Hi, Magdi.
Yes, Zoe?
You spoke about last time something about the concern about me arises from the imaginary me. And that really hit me because it was like I was stuck in a Vasana overload trying to make my way out of it. And then when you said that, it was like, oh, this is what, like Ramana Maharshi's analogy, I think, of the thief who turns into a policeman to try to catch the thief. I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder I'm stuck in this loop.
Yes.
But anyway, if you could just speak more about that. And also, I just need some encouragement, I think, because, you know, like I heard you were talking about how the vasanas get so subtle. And so it seems like I go through a period where, you know, everything is getting really smooth, and then boom. And they do, and they seem subtle, but then they also seem more fierce coming up.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, in terms of the separate self, in fact, there is no such a thing as a separate self. What we refer to as a separate self, you know, as language, we say the separate self. All what we are referring to is resistance and seeking. So you could say that there is a condition within the space. There is a condition to resist and to seek. And this condition, whenever you are close to it, you will feel its turbulence. You will feel its effect. You could be at peace, but when you get close to this realm of seeking and avoiding, desire, whether it's positive desire, wanting, or negative desire, rejecting, resisting, refusing, you will find an effect. You will experience this effect. One could say that in today's society, meaning this planet, you know, the human realm is infected with desire, with seeking and avoiding. And it's a virus that infects you from a very young age, let's say. And it's very subtle. You don't notice it before you know it. You are part of that tribe. And outside of the grace of contemplation and the grace of the Dharma, the gurus and the teachers, the rishis, and of course, the light of being, the only true guru, which is consciousness, that shines the light onto this realm. Outside of grace, it's a pretty sad state of affair. It's a doomed situation. Lifetime after lifetime, we are in the grip of desire. And we experience the unhappiness of getting and losing, winning and losing. The roller coaster ride that we refer to as a separate self. But in fact, there is no separate self. There's only one reality, and that reality is consciousness. So when the Dharma, when we hear the Dharma, realize, oh, well, there is a virus, there is an issue, there is a problem, there is ignorance. And there is a process of blooming, the blooming of the Dharma, the unfolding of the Dharma that takes assiduity and perseverance in your contemplation. And of course, it's all via grace. But there are phases within your contemplation, within your sadhana, where the belief that the separate self can rid itself of itself
Yeah, that's a good one.
that the separate self can rid itself of itself. There is that phase during our journey where the separate self sort of hijacks the true sadhana and sits in the driver's seat, meaning it sits in the seat of consciousness, which is the only I, the only self is consciousness. But the separate self sits in the seat of consciousness and says, okay, here I am to help you awaken. That's like you said, Ramana's anecdote about the thief disguising itself and coming into your house to help you rid yourself of the thief, you see. Now the way the trick occurs is that there is the image, a new image that arises of somebody who is on the path. There is no body on the path. It's a way of speaking. There is no body who is on the path. But yet, during your journey, at some point, some phase of your journey, there is the impression that there is somebody who is on the path. That I am on the path. Then that image or that trickery or that impression that there is somebody on the path is what creates the thief, that introduces the thief in your house to help you get rid of the thief.
And he totally fooled me too, Magdi.
Yes. You know, the direct teaching, this is really beautiful because now there is a direct teaching. It seems that, well, maybe I have the wrong impression, I don't know, but it seems that the direct teaching is becoming, it's starting to speak to people's hearts, and the direct teaching is now being shared. So the direct teaching is that there's only one I, there's only one reality. There's only one self. And you, the I is that. I is I. There's only I. There are no dual realities. There is no human reality. There is no, in religious terms, there is no reality outside of God's reality. There is no truth outside of God's truth. It's only one reality. And you awaken directly to that reality by knowing yourself in this very moment, which is not a moment in time. You do not exist in time. The you meaning truth, reality, consciousness is not in time. The me impression is in time. The story of me is in time. And if you are looking for redemption or salvation in time, you are doomed, because there is no time, in fact. So whatever you gain in time, you are bound to lose it in time. What you gain in time, you lose in time. Only that which is beyond time, beyond loss or gain, cannot be lost or gained. So the direct pointing is that I is not in time. Consciousness is not in time. Always return to the reality of that which is, that which perceives, in this very moment. In this very moment, the I is a transparent presence. You cannot perceive the I. You can perceive a bottle, you can perceive a hand, you can perceive a set of glasses, but the I, the self, the reality of being, that which is, that which perceives right now, that is the reality of consciousness, is not an object of perception. So you will find that whenever the separate self is coming to help you, you will very quickly after that, or maybe immediately with that, you will experience some emotions of spiritual pride, for example, or spiritual failure. You may feel that, goodness, I'm not good at it, or wow, I'm really great at it. Both I am not good at it, as well as I am great at it. They are both the flip side of the same coin, and that coin is ignorance. This process of the separate self hiding itself as a helper, disguising itself as a helper, is transparent. You can see it. You can notice it if you are interested, as long as you remain interested in happiness. Because the thief coming into your house disguised as a policeman to help you catch the thief is not going to solve the job for you. It is going to maintain the unhappiness. Sooner or later, actually, it will happen sooner than later. The entire contemplation is about peace and happiness. That is not contingent on anything. Whenever you notice the unhappiness, what is behind that unhappiness is the mistaken identity. You have simply at that moment left your inner knowingness that I am the light of being, and you have assumed yourself to be Zoe. So what was your other question? There were two questions.
Well, I think you kind of covered it. I was just asking for encouragement, and anything you say is always encouragement. Thank you for being here on this Freedom Day and giving us real freedom. Thanks, Magdi.
Yes. You know, for a truth lover to be living in contemplation and celebration is the best encouragement and the best way. It is no other way. There is no way to be living outside of contemplation and celebration of life, which is the living of the contemplation. And we forget, you know, we go back to our old paradigms. Oh, I'm busy with this, so I have this on my mind, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. We have to be really watchful of the trickeries of the mind. You know? It's always the old paradigm of referring to myself as somebody will arise. Be watchful of that. Do not just keep putting your love of truth and your interest in living that love on the front burner. That's all you need to do. Whichever way it presents itself to you. For a truth lover, you will find there be more and more opportunities available to you for contemplation and for celebration. But in ignorance, it's a darker and darker way, darker and darker path. It gets darker and darker until we cannot stand it any longer. Or until somehow we see the light, you know, even as a little glimmer of light. Any questions from anybody? Well, I will read this other question that was asked. I wonder if you could help me understand how to practically apply these concepts when relating to others in the world. First, why is it that there is only one consciousness, but yet each person acts and believes differently? Well, when you look at a tree, there is only one tree, right? Well, let's say there is only one tree in the forest. You're looking at a tree. It's one tree. But when you look at the tree, you will see 50, 60, 100 branches, or you may see 1,000 leaves. Every leaf and every branch is moving differently. The fact that there are, that in the realm, in the realm of forms, that there are many different forms acting differently, does not mean that there are two consciousnesses. You know, the monkeys, they are like a tribe of monkeys, and there is the head monkey and the subordinate, whatever. I don't know much about monkeys, but they're one tribe. I don't know what the word is. They're one group of monkeys, you say. But every monkey within that group has a different shape, size, way of behaving. Some are more subordinate than others, some are more dominant than others, etc. So the fact that there are many different body minds with different shapes, different tendencies, different personalities, different qualities, does not mean that there are many consciousnesses. Now, believing that consciousness depends on a particular body, in other words, that there is a particular consciousness to each particular body, will lead you to this question. The question being, how come there are many different people and therefore there's only one consciousness? It seems as if there should be many different consciousnesses. So the question is consciousness dependent on the body? And if the answer is yes, then body A will have consciousness A, body B will have consciousness B, body C will have consciousness C, etc. So we go directly to our experience of consciousness and our experience of the body in this moment, because there is no other contemplation outside of this moment. There is no such thing as contemplation in time. Contemplation is, one could say, live, real-time contemplation. So in this moment, when we contemplate what is consciousness, we are referring to a very particular non-experience. It's an experience which in fact is a non-experience, which is the reality that perceives. There is a reality in this moment. The screen of perception, let's say. There is a reality rather than nothing, which we refer to as consciousness, which also we refer to as I presence, I beingness, I awareness. So this is what this is how we use the term consciousness in our conversation. And the body, when we refer to the body in our experience, and we look at that right now, we find that the body appears to us. It appears to us as image, as thought, memory, or when you look in the mirror, an image, perception. It appears to you as memory. It also appears to you as bodily sensation. Mostly, the body appears to you in this moment as bodily sensation. So you can turn your sensation to your feet on the ground, or the sensation of your neck or your shoulder. It's what we refer to as the body. So the body appears to you as thoughts, images, appears to you as sensations, bodily sensations, and as perceptions. You can look at your hand as perceptions. So outside of that, there is no body. That's body is just perception, sensation, and images. That is our experience of the body. So the question is, does consciousness depend on the body? So does consciousness depend on what it perceives? So consciousness can perceive, you can perceive an oak tree, you can perceive an elephant, you can perceive a car, you can perceive your neighbor, you can perceive the body. We're perceiving thoughts, sensations, meditations. This is our experience. thoughts, perceptions, and sensations, for example, i.e. the body, what would they be? What would the body be without consciousness? If you remove consciousness, what would be a thought? It is not possible to have a thought or to have a perception or a sensation without consciousness. So we have established that thoughts, perceptions, and sensation depend on consciousness, require consciousness. Now the question is, does consciousness require the body? In deep sleep, as an example, consciousness is without a body. In the absence of a thought, consciousness is without a body. Now you may argue that there is no such thing as the absence of thought. But that is not so. In fact, if there was no absence of thought, there would be a constant thought. Constant thought. In fact, we don't experience a constant thought. We experience thought A, and then thought B, and then thought C, etc. We experience the thought, I love New York. The next thought is, gee, I would love to to get a dog. There are two different thoughts. Between thought A and thought B, there is no thought. Otherwise, thought A and thought B would be one thought. But we know them as two thoughts. Which, just going quickly over that, which basically puts in question the notion that there is no such thing as no thought. In fact, there is. And between thought A and thought B, it's not that there is nothing. In fact, although that there is no thought between thought A and thought B, this does not mean there is nothing. You still are. The I am still is, awareness still is, consciousness still is. So you need to contemplate, just using those couple of hints that I shared with you, that consciousness does not depend on the body-mind. And that therefore the notion that there are many different consciousnesses that belong to each body-mind, consciousness A, consciousness B, consciousness C, is fallacious. You also ask, how come there is abuse and violence? Is this also consciousness playing these acts out? How do we deal with abusers, murderers, with this understanding? Does this mean we should allow abuse and violence and not have boundaries when dealing with the world? Of course, it's very wise to have boundaries in the world, living in the world. In fact, the body, you know, as it appears to you, you can notice it has boundaries. The arm and the hands have boundaries. Everything in the appearance in the world, in the human experience, has its boundaries. The river has its river banks. They are the boundaries of the river, and sometimes it goes over its boundaries and we have flooding, and it's not a very happy thing. So at the body-mind level, there are boundaries. We honor these boundaries, we honor these conditions. When I come home, I go to my house. I don't go to my neighbor's house to have dinner or to sleep or to... It's very clear at the phenomenal realm how to operate. Now, in question about violence, of course, in relationships, you have boundaries against violence and abuse. You avoid these types of situations. You avoid engaging in them, and you avoid being subject to them. Yes, of course, that's how a gazelle avoids being eaten by a lion, you know, or a tiger. You know, she runs as quickly as she can. That's, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the gazelle is happy and sometimes the lion is happy. Now, in terms of your question about abuse and violence, how come there is abuse and violence? It's very simple. Like when we're identified with ourself, with our tribe, with our family, so we have a tendency to defend that, to protect that. So there is such a thing as a natural violence. When somebody is coming to hurt you and you have no choice but to be violent with them, of course you've exhausted other alternatives, then there is intelligent violence. Well, if you can call 911 and get some help, it's much better, of course. But who knows? You may end up in a situation where you have to exert some violence, some form of violence, that is intelligent, that is required. Now, ask how come there is abuse and violence. There are no mistakes. There are no mistakes. Abuse and violence has its right place within this human realm. It calls our attention. It may invite us to look a little closer at ourselves. Because the violence that we perceive, we also recognize within ourselves. Not that we are acting that way, but that quality of that hidden inner emotion. We have a tendency to put the violence out there. Somebody out there is being violent. We are not, you see. I think that when we look at violence, both around us and also within us, it's really, sometimes I've experienced myself being, this not a physical violence, but an inner violence. It somehow brought me to silence and to looking, to really, like, it's sort of, you can't dance around it. You can't wiggle your way around it. You have to, it sort of calls you to looking at it without filters. But, a volcano may explode or a tsunami occurs, within a few hours, kills tens of thousands of people and animals and uproots trees and etc. The ants get killed and it's okay. It's okay because What is dying is meant to die. It's never been truly alive. What can be killed, what is killed can be killed, is killable. Only that which is not killable is eternal. So you need to find that which is not mortal within yourself to come to the peace. The peace is never outside of you. It's not a world peace. The world peace arises from the peace within you. It doesn't arise from the end of violence in the world. It arises from your realizing your true self. And then you are the shining light. Then you are the shining light of being, of the peace and the love and the beauty of being. Hi, Eric. Nice to see you. You're right. I once had to kick a dog away from attacking my dog. Yes, but that violence on my part was not a psychological violence. Yes, it was just necessary at the body-mind level. I was still at peace. Yes, yeah, yes, right. Yes, this is. Yeah, there are acts that seem to be violent, but they're not. They have a different. They're coming from a different place, and they have a different objective than than the psychological me, right?
I just thought I'd add that.
Yeah.
And it appears it's very spontaneous too. Something like
Yes.
that will happen. You observe it. Oh, I took action that was called for in that moment.
Yes.
Oh, hopefully.
Yes, right. It's spontaneous. It's an action that's not the result of thought and analysis. Although there are some actions that are also appropriate and that may seem violent, that are the result of thought and like, for example, when England was deciding whether to declare war against Germany, there was a lot of thought about that. But yes, yes, you're right. There are actions that are sort of immediate. They're not preconceived, and it's as if somehow you're being acted through. You're like the instrument of, not a personal instrument, as if you're serving another purpose than your personal purpose somehow.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just called for in the moment.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing. I didn't hear that well, Eric.
It's just something that is called for in the moment.
Yes. Right. It's appropriate, an appropriate response. And I like the word responsibility. The word responsibility, I like to look at it as responsibility is the appropriate response at the moment. There is an appropriate response at the moment. Sometimes it is no response at all, and sometimes it is just and the responsibility, when we're acting responsibly, somehow grace is acting through us. And of course, we are the instrument of the action, but we are not the personal actor. There is an action that seems to be personal, but
Yes, I noticed that with compassionate actions too. Sometimes it's more clear if I'll give money to someone who's, on a street corner, look them in the eye, connect as, we're the same being.
mm-hmm.
And it'll be this, wonderful sense afterwards, like, wow, we really are just one being.
Yeah.
And,
It's interesting that you bring this up because I sometimes I see somebody, how they walking, to collect money from car to car to car. I mean, in Washington, D.C., they do that because it's a big city. There are many intersections where there are people who are always there, and sometimes I just sort of look at them and then I look away. And sometimes I look at them and I'm reaching for $1, you see. And it's interesting. I was wondering, how does that work? I don't know. Sometimes it's no, and sometimes yes.
yeah, it's not a rule. It's always just,
Right.
what is my, what feels, what is my heart saying? What is it?
Yeah. I've even noticed the thought, darn, you're young, you could get a job, I know that's a judgment, but sometimes it arises,
Yeah, it's a time to look at the judgments and fears that come up about a perceived person.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then step beyond that, and then see.
Yes.
But like you said, there's no mistakes.
Yeah. Yes.
You might give some money to someone, but who are we to judge what's
right
with it? And even if we give it to them, and it's a perceived mistake, does it really matter?
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's no mistakes.
Right.
Go back.
Right.
Maybe I really shouldn't have done that, but for what?
Right. Yes. Yes. It's amazing how it's as if everything is a topic of contemplation. Everything is there just for you, custom made, custom made.
I remind myself of that all the time. I said I remind myself of that all the time.
Yes.
There's no real problem. It's just what is it going back to always.
Yes. Yeah, when we start to sort of see that there are no accidents, it's all sort of a grand design, then our tendency to argue with it, to reject it, to think our way around it, that quiets down, because somehow it's like saying yes to everything. It's like, okay, what is that about? What's being said, what's being shared, what's being exposed, as opposed to the old paradigm of, oh no, it shouldn't be like this.
Yeah, well, if you think you're separate, then if you believe yourself to be separate, it's always going to be a battle.
Yes, right.
Even trying to quiet the mind.
Right. Yeah. In terms of quieting the mind, I have engaged in years of Zen meditation that also quiet the mind, but I found that there was a passion towards that. It was not like an interest in quieting the mind. There was a passion that bypassed the mind. It had no, I couldn't explain it. It was just big resounding yes to sitting. And as a consequence, you know, after the fact, the mind quieted down, but there was no personal intention to quiet the mind. And I think even when there is a personal intention to quiet the mind, sooner or later we're going to come to face who is it that has this interest? What is it? Is there a personal interest? Is there such a thing as a personal mind? It's an interesting question that sooner or later along the journey will arise for us. What am I truly? What is there a person with a personal mind? Good questions, you know.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't suggest there's anything wrong or with meditation or that that's misguided. If you're drawn to that, yeah. Take you
Right.
to wherever you're going.
Right.
Mistakes.
Right.
Eventually, you may wonder, why isn't this working? Or maybe it'll take you to, like you say, inquiry.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Francis always says about happiness: if you love to do what you're doing, then do it, you know. But don't make your happiness contingent onto any activity, or don't place conditions onto your happiness. And if you do, well, it's something to be look at sooner or later. I wanted to ask, is the sound, are you hearing me clearly? Just, you know, technically, I want to make sure. I'm wondering if I should be using earphones, or if just speaking like this is good enough.
You're very clear to me.
Okay.
Something.
Me as well, Magdi. Loud and clear.
Okay. Because I remember when I first started the Zoom a few weeks ago, there was a sound issue, and I was wondering if I should be using the earphones, but maybe I was speaking very low at that time. So, well, thanks for the feedback. Okay, well, very lovely to be with you all. You know, Eric, nice to see you. You know, it's really lovely to see you. And Shiva, salut, ça va?
Yes, ça va. I love you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay.
Yes, beautiful.
Okay, good.
Well, thank you all. Very beautiful.
Je t'appelle demain. Hein? Ciao, bye.
Okay, ciao. Okay, bye, Holly. Sorry, Eric. Thanks.